Introduction. The Forgotten Literacy. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork. This is not decorative poetry, it is a proposition. It tells us that the heavens do something. They declare. They are not mute matter suspended above the earth for the delight of astronomers, nor are they a dead expanse of lights whose only meaning is chemical, physical, and mathematical. They speak, not in the manner of human speech, but in the manner of created order. They signify, they bear witness, they stand over mankind as a vast and ancient testimony, not asking whether modern man approves of their language, but declaring regardless. The tragedy is not that the heavens have ceased to declare. The tragedy is that man has largely forgotten how to hear them. Modern man approaches the sky in two dominant ways. The first is materialist. He sees fire, gas, gravity, orbit, distance, pressure, radiation, and time. In one sense, he sees truly. The stars are physical objects, and it is no small achievement to measure their properties with precision. Yet this knowledge, however impressive, is not the whole of sight. A man may examine the ink of a book under a microscope and still never read the sentence. He may know the paper, the fibers, the binding, the chemical composition of the ink, and remain entirely ignorant of the meaning. So it is with the heavens. To know what they are made of is not necessarily to know what they declare. The second approach is worse. It is the approach of superstition, self-divination, and spiritual vanity. Here the heavens are not reduced to matter, but they are reduced to man. The zodiac becomes a mirror for personality, romance, anxiety, ambition, and fate. The stars are interrogated not as witnesses to God, but as servants of the self. What does my sign say about me? Becomes the governing question. The heavens are no longer allowed to declare the glory of God. They are conscripted to flatter the unstable ego of fallen man. This work rejects both reductions. It rejects the materialist reduction because creation is not meaningless merely because it is measurable. It rejects the astrological reduction because meaning is not the same as prediction, and symbolism is not the same as occultism. The heavens do not belong to the atheist who strips them of meaning, nor to the astrologer who corrupts their meaning. They belong to God. If they declare, then their declaration must be interpreted under his authority. The argument of this work is therefore not that astrology is true, quite the opposite. Astrology, as commonly understood, is a corruption. It is not the fulfillment of celestial meaning, but the degradation of it. It takes a public testimony and turns it into a private fortune. It takes a structure that may have once pointed upward toward God and bends it downward toward appetite, fear, and self-description. It is not the original use of the heavens, but a parasitic misuse of them. Corruption, however, is not the same as invention. This distinction is crucial. A thing may be abused precisely because it was once meaningful. Counterfeit money does not prove that money is worthless. It proves that money is worth imitating. False worship does not prove that worship is unreal. It proves that man was made to worship and that this true impulse can be bent toward false objects. In the same way, the corruption of the zodiac does not necessarily prove that the zodiac is meaningless. It may suggest that something meaningful was there to be stolen. The central suspicion of this book is simple. What the modern world calls the zodiac may preserve, beneath paganism, mythology, astrology, and New Age self-obsession, the damaged remains of an older testimony. That testimony, if it exists, is not equal to Scripture. It cannot save. It cannot preach justification by faith. It cannot expound covenant, atonement, resurrection, priesthood, sanctification, or the mystery of the church. The heavens are not a second Bible. They are not to be consulted above the written word. They are not a rival canon. Scripture alone gives the authoritative interpretation of God's redemptive work. Yet, Scripture itself tells us that creation speaks. The heavens declare. Day unto day uttereth speech. Night unto night sheweth knowledge. The biblical mind is not embarrassed by the idea that creation bears witness. It is commanded to recognize it. The question is not whether creation declares, but what it declares, how it declares, and whether man has retained enough sanity to distinguish declaration from divination. This is why the zodiac must be approached carefully. The very word now carries the smell of occult bookshops, horoscopes, birth charts, crystals, and spiritual merchandising. Many Christians recoil from it instinctively and not without reason. There is real danger in the occult corruption of the stars. Scripture forbids divination. It condemns the attempt to read fate, manipulate spiritual powers, or seek forbidden knowledge through created things. No argument in this work weakens that prohibition. But a prohibition against divination is not a prohibition against meaning. To forbid the worship of creation is not to deny that creation testifies of its maker. To condemn astrology is not to say that the heavens are silent. One must not confuse the abuse of a thing with its proper use. The serpent's theft does not annul God's ownership. The question before us, therefore, is not whether one should practice astrology. One should not. The question is whether the symbols now captured by astrology may once have served another purpose altogether. Were they originally tools of prediction, or have they become predictive through corruption? Were they invented by paganism, or did paganism inherit and distort something older? Do the signs belong essentially to superstition, or do they contain the fragments of a primordial proclamation? This leads us to the earliest problem of human knowledge. When Cain and Abel brought their offerings before God, did they know why they were sacrificing? The question is more serious than it first appears. Genesis presents the act without giving us a formal origin for it. Abel brings of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. Cain brings of the fruit of the ground. One offering is received, the other is rejected. The narrative assumes that the act has meaning. It assumes moral distinction, symbolic weight, and divine evaluation. Yet no written law has been given. No Levitical system exists. No priesthood has been established. No tabernacle has been built. No sacrificial manual has been handed down in the text. And still the offerings are made. This means that knowledge precedes written instruction. Cain and Abel act within a world already charged with meaning. They are not ritual inventors experimenting blindly before a silent deity. They are responding to some prior understanding, whether received directly from God, transmitted orally through Adam and Eve, embedded in creation, or some combination of these. The important point is that the first recorded acts of worship after Eden do not arise in a vacuum. This opens the door to a larger possibility. Perhaps early man did not inhabit the mute, disenchanted world imagined by modern thought. Perhaps he lived in a world where meaning was not locked away in books because books had not yet become the chief vessels of memory. Perhaps the world itself, under God's design, carried signs, patterns, and sequences by which truth could be preserved and contemplated. The heavens would be the most suitable medium for such a purpose. They are universal, they are public, they are stable. They are not controlled by kings, priests, scribes, or empires. They are visible to shepherds and rulers, to children and elders, to tribes before writing and nations after writing. They repeat, but not chaotically. They proceed in ordered cycles. They mark time. They form patterns. They endure beyond the decay of human institutions. If God wished to place a testimony above all mankind, where else would be more fitting? This does not mean that every ancient interpretation of the heavens was correct. It certainly does not mean that every later mythology surrounding the constellations is trustworthy. Corruption multiplies as memory decays. Name shift. Stories attach themselves to older images. Pagan imagination elaborates. Civilizations localize universal symbols into tribal gods, national myths, fertility rites, and political cults. The original, if there was an original, becomes buried under centuries of misuse, but burial is not destruction. A buried thing may still be recovered. The purpose of this work is not to accept every inherited association surrounding the zodiac, nor to baptize astrology, nor to pretend that pagan mythology can be trusted as revelation. The purpose is more restrained and more serious, to examine whether the ordered sequence of the zodiac, when stripped of its corruptions and judged under the authority of Scripture, bears the marks of a symbolic testimony compatible with the gospel. The sequence itself is the key. Individual symbols are easy to manipulate. Given enough imagination, one can make almost any image mean almost anything. But sequence disciplines interpretation. A single sign may be ambiguous. A progression is harder to dismiss. If the signs move from the woman and the promised seed to judgment, conflict, conquest, sacrifice, outpouring, multiplication, restoration, power, union, gathering, and final kingship, then we are no longer dealing with isolated curiosities. We are dealing with architecture. This is why the zodiac must be read, if at all, as a procession rather than a personality chart. The modern question, "What is my sign?" is already a corruption of the deeper question. The proper question is not, "Which part of the heavens describes me?" but, "What do the heavens declare?" The former turns the sky into a servant of self-knowledge. The latter allows creation to return to its proper function as witness. The thesis will not be proven in one stroke. Symbolic arguments rarely operate that way. They accumulate. They gather force through correspondence, order, recurrence, and coherence. One stone may be dismissed. A wall is harder to ignore. A whole city, once seen, demands explanation. The reader is therefore asked for patience, but not credulity. This work does not ask him to believe every claim merely because it is ancient, strange, or attractive. Nor does it ask him to abandon discernment in the name of wonder. It asks only that he consider whether Christian thought may have surrendered too much territory to its enemies. The stars were made by God before they were misread by pagans. The heavens declared before astrologers sold horoscopes. The signs, if they speak truly at all, must be reclaimed from corruption and brought under the judgment of Scripture. The New Age has not discovered the zodiac, it has vandalized it. The task, then, is an act of recovery. Not recovery in the sentimental sense, as though every old thing is pure because it is old, but recovery in the biblical sense, the taking back of what has been stolen, the cleansing of what has been polluted, the discerning of what has been confused. If the heavens declare the glory of God, then the Christian must not be content to leave that declaration in the hands of those who twist it toward darkness. We begin then, not with the horoscope, but with the heavens, not with fate, but with testimony, not with man's personality, but with God's glory, not with superstition, but with the possibility of an ancient proclamation whose meaning has been obscured but not erased. And the first problem we must face is this. Before Scripture was written, before law was given, before priesthood and temple, before Moses, before Israel, before the prophets, man already knew that sacrifice mattered. How did he know? That is where our inquiry begins.